All right, it is now 7 o'clock. I'll call the April 13th, 2021 hybrid legislative board meeting to order. The public will notice that some of the board members are in the high school library live, and many of us are participating by Zoom. We welcome you. We'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. For England, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Marseille. We'll next item on the agenda is recognitions. Mr. Perez.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Hopefully I have the ability to share here, and I will share my screen. Okay, good evening, everyone. Dr. Marseille, members of the board, and CSD community, thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been doing at Cheltenham Elementary this school year. We are excited about what we've done, both virtually with our students and in person. As you are aware, we've had students in our building, in particular, since October this school year with some of the special education students, which was amazing. It also provided myself with a lot of information and experience in moving forward once we did have a larger amount of students in our building when we moved to the hybrid programming in February. So as far as our arrival and dismissal and things of that nature, I wanted to share this picture because this was kind of back in February when we were kind of dealing with all the weather. So happy we're not having to deal with that right now. But you know, our arrival and dismissal has gone really smoothly when we were planning things out, obviously being where our building is located, and we really thought about how it would impact the community, having the amount of vehicles in our car line, et cetera, with a lot of families indicating that they would be using our car line versus busing. So we really took that into in mind as we plan things out, and we really were diligent in ensuring the safety of our students entering and exiting the building. And I want to commend our support staff, especially for the support that they've had with this process and ensuring that all students arrive to our building safely and depart safely. These are some pictures of the classroom instruction and what things look like. When students are in the building for in-person or in virtual, both the students and staff have adapted well to the daily schedule, various assignment location changes. Our specialists at the K-4 level, art, music, and library, are on carts, and they've been visiting classrooms instead of students coming to them. That they've adapted very well to that. Our specialist staff, they've done an amazing job, as well as our 2-week rotations for our specialists has also been received well by our specialists and staff, as they can really delve into various projects during that 2-week time frame. So they're really, that's been working well. You know, and obviously as we've been working through our schedule, as you know, the technical glitches have been few and far between in our classrooms, and our teachers have done a great job in kind of planning when those things happen. Our in-person students are enjoying kind of the extra elbow room that they're getting with the extra desks that they have next to the main desk. Our teachers have become creative in the way that they teach, check for understanding, assess, and challenge their students. Many have been open and trying new things, and the level of team collaboration is at an all-time high. Grade level teams meet regularly, more than I've ever seen, to plan out the weekly lessons. They're working smarter, not harder, in developing both their synchronous and asynchronous lessons. We continue to support our students during this time. And obviously always keeping in mind the social emotional needs of students for our in-person and our virtual learners. During our non-instructional periods, our students have adjusted nicely to, the temporary lunch and recess procedures that we have in place. There are some good things that we have learned from these new changes and procedures. And there's some things that we actually might keep once we kind of get back to some normalcy. I think one of the things that kids really enjoy is the fact that we're accessing more play surfaces that we haven't accessed before, because we're trying to socially distance students. So areas that they could not access before, we're providing a little bit more access and green spaces for them to play that we did not have the opportunity to have them access before, but now they're accessing it. And I think those are some things that we're going to keep in our plans moving forward. We continue to support our students and provide the necessary safety nets that we put into place for several years at CES. We continue to have our PBIS team, our Positive Behavior Intervention Support team, and one of those things is continuing to recognize our students for their hard work, kind of aligning what we do in our SEL lessons, and providing opportunities for us to recognize those students that are modeling the appropriate behaviors that we're teaching them. So as you can see, here are some examples of some of the Student of the Week winners for March, who really modeled what teamwork and cooperation looks like, both in school and virtually. We also continue to support our students who need academic or behavioral support, and keeping, especially we've also had to expand having some attendance conferences, things of that nature, to ensure that, especially with our virtual students, they're continuing to be engaged and present in those learning spaces. These are some fun things that we do at Cheltenham. I'm not sure if you are all aware, but we do raise trout at our building every year. We either raise brook trout or rainbow trout, and we release them, so we get them as eggs. So here's our tank and a little picture of over 100 rainbow trout we have this year, and we will be releasing them. Last year, our fourth graders had an opportunity to go on a field trip to Pennypack. They learned a lot about, within that, we incorporate this into our science curriculum, but they learned a lot about clean water, water conservation, and the impact to our local community. Unfortunately, students won't be able to go to Pennypack this year. However, we'll make sure that when we release our trout, we are videotaping everything for them to see as they kind of grow, and we release them once they get to about 3 to 4 inches long. But it's pretty exciting as we do this every year at our building. Another event that we had last month, our Read Across America. We had several members of the Phi Beta Sigma and Phi Gamma Sigma alumni read to our students virtually. Obviously we're continuing to have fun with our dress up and dress down days throughout the school year, and our spirit days. We have to make learning fun for students and also build the morale within the building. So it's important that we have these days and opportunities with our students. Hopefully you had an opportunity to see the Philly Mag article. We had a great opportunity to have our students featured. And I'd like to thank Mr. Kaufman for kind of setting this up, but our students are really excited about the whole photo shoot and opportunity to represent our district in this article. And I wanted to share with you something that our Our PTO has sponsored, and we're going to make this available for all 3rd and 4th grade students. It's a financial literacy workshop that's going to be available, and we're going to make it available for all 3rd and 4th grade students. And the information has been shared with the other principals to share with their families. And it'll be an opportunity. We will do this during one of our asynchronous Wednesday days, where students can have an opportunity to come in and learn about financial literacy. And that is all. Thank you for the opportunity to share. And we continue to hopefully have a great end of the school year. But we've learned a lot with this process, and our kids, these are just some photos of some of our 4th graders that are excited about their culminating months at Cheltenham Elementary, and they're excited about moving to Elkins Park next year.
Mr. Perez, thank you so much. I'm intrigued by the rainbow trout. Can we tag them so we know if they grew up?
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That would make it a really interesting science experiment. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. You know, I reflect on the last slide, that 4th grade, and I think about Cheyenne and how excited she was in that transition. And I want to again publicly acknowledge you for the work that you do for all students since I've been here, but more so for the way you took care of our little one, who has blossomed tremendously. And you remember that little shy little kid that walked into your building, and now she's blossoming from that perspective, and growing out of her clothes every other day because she's getting really, really tall. So thank you as your colleague working with you, and definitely thank you as a father for all you do for your students, especially ours. But that 4th grade picture made me think about, indeed, I lived the experience of how 4th graders are really excited to close out the school year and can't wait to get to Elkins Park. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille.
Thank you, Perez. We'll move on to the solicitor's report. Mr. Roos.
Good evening. There was an executive session last Thursday evening regarding personnel matters, which are on the agenda tonight. There is also interviews of administrative employees that are on the agenda for tonight's meeting. We're not interviews, meet and greet regarding administrative positions on tonight's agenda, which I would also announce as well.
Thank you, Mr. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you? I apologize. I thought you were done.
I said that's all I have.
Oh, then I didn't interrupt you. Next, we'll move on to the student representatives report. Lisa and/or Quincy.
Oh, thank you for having me coming out tonight. We just have a few committee updates. So from our environmental and sustainability, they had their first climate curriculum meeting 2 weeks ago, and it provided input on the district's energy policy revisions. And we emailed our notes to the school board, and we're still waiting for a response from that. From our civics and community engagement, they hosted our student activism showcase and wanted to thank the school board members who attended. And for those who couldn't, please be sure to watch it on Cheltenham's YouTube channel. We are currently waiting for a response about the school board's meeting to proceed with the plan, and we'll be starting our voter registration soon, since May is next month. In terms of student council in general, we're still discussing on how to have our meetings more accessible to our student body to increase our transparency. And then in terms of class officers, seniors have announced that their prom location and ticket prices, and we are currently hosting a Wawa Hoagie fundraiser where people can purchase coupons located on the online payment center. So thank you.
Thank you, Quincy. Did Lisa have anything to add? I know she was here.
I don't. That's all on the agenda for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your report and keep up all of the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the president's report. I have a couple of action items. The first is the contract bargaining agreement with the Business Employees Council, the BEC, and I'll read the motion. The Board of School Directors recommends the approval of the collective bargaining agreement between Cheltenham School District and Business Employee Council effective July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, conditioned upon BEC ratification of this collective bargaining agreement, which I understand has happened. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve, Julie Haywood.
Do I have a second?
Second, Dan Schultz.
Is there any board discussion? Hearing none, I'll just say that I was involved in that process, and I'm happy to have come to an amicable resolution. Both parties gave and took, and we have an agreement on a contract that makes sense for the district and for its employees. Thank you for all the cooperation that led us to that point. I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. The next action item is the appointment of the board treasurer. And that is, that role is taken on by an employee in the finance office who used to be Karen Washington, but upon her resignation, we've hired Liu Kim to be appointed. And I'll move for, I'll read the motion. The superintendent recommends that Liu Kim be appointed as board treasurer effective March 22nd, 2021 through June 30th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Cohen.
Second,
Cohen
Charles
first.
Purdell Williams.
Second, Charles Purdell Williams. Any board discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. And the last item on the agenda is the approval of the treasurer's report. I'll move, it's as listed in the attachments. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. England first, Ms. Lohman second. Did I hear that?
Correct.
Any board discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. And then I have a communication to the community that I'd like to make. This is a board statement on Dr. Marseille's unfortunate resignation. We were sorry to have to hear and accept the Cheltenham School District that Superintendent Dr. Wagner Marseille has resigned his position after Dr. Marseille's service, and wish him well in his new endeavor. He has certainly left an indelible impression on this district. We will be moving forward in an expeditious manner to do two things. One, and first, appoint an interim superintendent to take over Dr. Marseille's day-to-day duties until we complete the second item on our immediate list of things to do, which is to engage a search firm or an entity who will give us the services of searching for our superintendent so that we get the best possible candidate out of the people who apply to become our next superintendent. The board will be working diligently on both of those tasks in the next days and weeks. I want to, on behalf of the board, assure the community that we are committed to advancing the important initiatives that Dr. Marseille started in his tenure and that will, with our commitment, continue when he leaves. And on a personal note, and on behalf of the board, I want to genuinely and deeply thank Dr. Marseille for his service, for what he has brought to this district and what he has left us with. And most particularly, our focus on inclusion and our work to try to address the gaps in achievement and opportunity that our minority students experience. And we will. That's all I have. Next, we'll move on to the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. Mr. England.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. The Intermediate Unit Board of Directors met on Wednesday, March 24th. I'm going to share some highlights from the actions of that meeting. The MCIU was proud to serve as a vaccination location during the month of March. And through a partnership with AMI and the assistance of the National Guard, administered 10,600 vaccines across Montgomery County. Dr. Missy Garber, a vision support teacher in the Office of Student Services, was invited by the director of the Bureau of Special Education to become a member of the Pennsylvania Advisory Committee on Education of Students who are blind or visually impaired. The IU and through the Penn program has focused tremendous resources over the last several years on blind and visually impaired students, and there's quite a bit of pride about the work that we have been able to do. Dr. Speaker, our executive director, and Ms. Tina Valletto supported the Pottsgrove Board of Directors in its recent search for a new superintendent, and Dr. David Finnerty was recently appointed to serve as new superintendent of schools effective July 1st, 2021. The MCIU will be supporting the Harrisburg School District in its search for a new superintendent in the next steps of the Harrisburg Recovery Plan. The Intermediate Unit became involved in the management and operation of the Harrisburg School District 2 years ago when its receiver fired the school board with cause. And it has been quite a journey as that school district has been turned around, and there is quite a bit of pride in terms of how student needs and community needs have been put to the forefront in Harrisburg once again. The MCIU board approved the budget revision to the state early intervention program that secured $702,373 additional dollars. Human Resources hired 9 new employees, which were ratified during the meeting. We had 10 retirements and 1 professional staff who was granted tenure. MCIU board approved a number of contracted service agreements to support the following initiatives: the Path to Graduation, the Summer Technology Institute of supporting blind and low vision students, and various trainings services provided by the offices of MCIU. We had to approve a budget revision for early intervention access, that is state funding from the medical assistance program known as Access. The revision was a decrease of $190,393, and that was a direct effect of the pandemic. Our Head Start Family Council, Parents Council met and approved their ongoing budget. Our Head Start, Montgomery County Head Start has done very well, and we have received additional funding to not only help us help the Head Start classrooms across Montgomery County with additional supports during this pandemic period, but continuing to do so for the coming year. Lastly, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, April the 28th. Our board meeting will begin at 6:45. It is open to the public and currently is scheduled to be held via Zoom. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. England. Next up on the agenda is Eastern Center for Arts and Technology, Mr. Burdell Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. The Eastern Center for Arts and Technology Joint Operating Committee met on the evening of March 11th, 2021. First item was the review of the Certificate of Accreditation for our Culinary Arts program at Eastern. Many of us understand that one of the aspects of not being able to go to Eastern in person is the fact that we're missing out on the benefits of the amazing culinary arts program there. Kudos to that program. We also, under the president's report, were able to approve the articulation agreement with the Penn Technical Institute. Again, another agreement with a technical organization to support Eastern students through cooperative learning. We then moved to our favorite part of the Joint Operating Committee meeting, which is the acknowledgement of our Student of the Month. The March Student of the Month was Cameron Pressman, a senior at Lower Moreland High School. And just to share with the community, Cameron was recognized for her outstanding work in Eastern's cosmetology program. When she was in 10th grade, she attended Eastern's presentation at Lower Moreland High School, which all of our high schools have the opportunity to see, and then visited Eastern to learn more about the program. She always had interest in the field of cosmetology, but never, quite understood that she would, want to go down that road for a career path or a potential career path. She's a student ambassador at Eastern, who speaks on behalf of her program at recruitment events. She is the cosmetology program's representative for Skills USA, which is the student leadership organization program. She is also has earned many industry standard certifications, including her several hair color certifications and other barber certifications, which really indicates her dedication, not just to infection control, but also in perfecting her craft. She was selected by the instructors at Eastern to attend the Career and Technical Student Organization Fall Leadership Conference. This year, unfortunately, the interactive aspect of the conference was diminished because of the pandemic restrictions. However, the leadership conference was held virtually. At that conference, Cameron earned her first Skills USA Framework certification and the Statesman Assessment Award. The Framework certification is an e-learning module where participants learn about Skills USA and how it ensures the development of world-class workers, leaders, and responsible citizens through the Skills USA framework. The Statesman Award, the Statesman Assessment Award is presented to members who demonstrate Skills USA knowledge and civic awareness, along with an understanding of the Skills USA framework and how to articulate their personal career and technical education experience. At Lower Moreland High School, she has been on the honor roll since 2017 and supported the Manython, largest student-run philanthropy organization in the world, which I'm sure very many of us on the call are familiar with all of those proceeds being directed toward fighting pediatric cancer at Penn State's Hershey Medical Center. After she graduates, Cameron plans to attend Temple University for business management and plans to start off by working at a salon, but eventually has plans to open her own. After the presentation of the acknowledgement and presentation of the Student of the Month, we were able to review items under academic affairs. We received the following updates: PDE program approval, adult education enrollment snapshot, and February 2021 activities report. To reflect a bit on the adult education enrollment aspect, I did want to just review with the community that, very similar to how adult school was run in Cheltenham, the adult education program at the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology is held in off hours where students are not present in the building, but still provide a significant level of job and career training for adults who are seeking to grow their skill set and potentially attain a career in any of the fields that offer programming for our adult groups. Moving on, there was an approval of a very sizable donation to the new robotics and automated technology program. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has helped in a group, has helped to partner with Eastern as well as with Demco Automation to provide 4 Allen Bradley Micrologics PLCs, the associated DIN rails, wire ducts, wire management hardware, Bosch rail, phase converter, and glue tank systems as well for the robotics program. Just for the knowledge of the community, the robotics program at Eastern is in its first year. There has been a complete redesign of the robotics laboratory, and with the donations very similar to one that I just shared, there is a significant amount of advanced robotics and automated technology equipment that, just knowing what that industry is about from my experiences in my day-to-day job, any adult would be impressed with the experience that they would get in this job training environment. Again, just wanting to highlight the benefits for a high school student who may be interested in that program. Moving on, under policy, one of 2 items of importance. One, the Joint Operating Committee approved the Eastern administration to increase the number of in-person days for up to 5 per week, with approval of the JOC President and Superintendent of Record. As of April 6th, 2021, the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology has their students in class 4 days per week in a very similar format to that of which the Cheltenham High School is operating under at this time. Additionally, the Joint Operating Committee also spoke and exchanged some commentary regarding the memorandum of understanding the Joint Operating Committee has with the Upper Moreland Police Department. At the time, the Joint Operating Committee wanted to discuss the memorandum of understanding further and tabled the motion to provide more time for evaluating the current agreement. A date has not been set for when the MOU will return to the agenda. Under Personnel Affairs, the Joint Operating Committee approved a series of summer work agreements for Eastern teachers in preparation for the summer program offerings. And that concludes my report. The next meeting of the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology Joint Operating Committee is tomorrow that would be April 14th at 8 p.m. And that is going to be held via Zoom. The link to the meeting can be found on Eastern's website at eastech.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riddell Williams. Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Mr. Fishbein, before you get to the superintendent's report, I just raised my hand. You may not have seen it. That's okay. A quick question for Mr. Riddell Williams. Is
Sure.
Eastern planning to, introduce any new programming for the fall?
At this time, we have not received any updates about new programming. What has been discussed and the Joint Operating Committee has provided approval for expansion of programs that have shown increased interest in having wait lists over the years. So I don't have that list readily available right now, but there are at least 4 programs, one of them including allied health, that the Eastern is going to be expanding their offering in. Additionally, the newly created robotics and automated technology program is a program of particular importance. The administration at Eastern acknowledges that, likely due to the pandemic, that the enrollment in that course was not as high as expected. And so there's a lot of energy being put into marketing and exploring other avenues to garner interest from students in that course. But I can find out about any new course offerings at this time. I don't know of any, but I will share with the board if I do.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Seeing no other board questions, I will move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Marseille.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. I want to follow up to Mr. Riddell Williams' comments. I will concur, and we can double check with Dr. Lipinarski, but I agree with you that I don't have knowledge of any additional brand new courses that are being offered at Eastern at this time. It's an enhancement, an opportunity to open doors. I think it also speaks to the issue of equity in terms of how we try to increase participation in particular programs, because that has been a challenge for Eastern, as there you don't want to deny access because there are too many people who are interested in the program, right? That doesn't make any sense. Even though I understand there's budgetary restraints, and Dr. Panarski has done a masterful job of trying to find ways to address that equity challenge, along with the work she's doing with Mr. Riddell Williams and looking at equity across the board at Eastern. None of this is ever intentional. It just happens because you just go into operation mode, and then you realize, oh, there may be some people not having the same level of experience or access. So the both of us would definitely check back, but I would agree with Mr. Riddell Williams that I can't recall anything new being shared, but like everyone who is sitting here on this call, there's a lot of meetings and there could have been something that came across the airwaves that we may have missed, but I'm eager to follow up as well with Mr. Riddell Williams to check. And talking about meetings, we have Mr. Riddell remind us that we have one tomorrow night as well. So with that, thank you, Mr. Fishbein, and I'll start my superintendent's report. A couple of things I want to show. I'm trying to share my screen, if I may. Thank you. So a couple of things with regards to some items coming up that I want to share, and I'll talk about really briefly, but wanting to bring to your attention, even though I believe there's been some communication on at least a couple of these, but some I need to provide additional clarity. You know, this thing about accountability is a double-edged sword. And we had the opportunity last March, when unfortunately we had to close schools, and we were scrambling, and the world was scrambling with what to do and how to do it. The state of Pennsylvania was provided, and like most other states, waiver from standardized testing. Unfortunately, that is not the case this time around. And the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and obviously in compliance with the United States Department of Education, we are required to ensure that students sit down for standardized testing. There has been a number of standardized testing town halls that have taken place, and we're fortunate because one of the things that we need to think about moving forward is the benefit that all these meetings have been Zoom and they've been recorded. And individuals have had the opportunity to come back and watch those versus this really stagnant PowerPoint set of slides that really don't sometimes give you a lot of context unless you are there. So our principals did a great job in helping families understand what to expect. So that took place the last couple weeks of March, and had an opportunity to watch all the videos and principals being in sync and how they are explaining that process to their families. And you know, they mentioned some key items, and one of the things I really want to focus on in my report is balancing test anxiety and district scores. And for the parents who have emailed, there's a very clear winner here. If you are experiencing anxiety and distress, and your child is about taking the test, there are options. And for those who are concerned about the district scores, in this pandemic, I want to tell you that though I can understand if I had to step back about why the federal government is still moving forward with standardized testing in a pandemic. And though they're talking about that it's really just a mechanism to keep track, it won't hurt school districts. But then it begs the question, then why do it at all? And why put children through that process? I would think differently about that, right? But that's Monday morning quarterbacking, for a lack of a better term, for those in leadership positions. I'm sure at the time they felt that was the best decision to make, right? And I know these decisions are very hard. But for the parents who are emailing me, do what's in the best interest of your child, as always. But I don't think you need for me to say that. I just know that you're communicating about test anxiety. I also want to share with you that we've received word that that mandate that required a certain percentage of students to sit down for the test, or else it would impact the district, is no longer an issue in terms of that. Yes, for those who are comfortable, sit down for that, because the state and the federal government is requiring school districts. I have to present the test. If I had the authority, I'd think differently about presenting the test. We all know what the research has told us all the way back in March, April, and May, when PDE came out with their report saying the significant challenge that an online experience will bring, or remote learning experiences, especially for those districts who don't have access to technology, especially the supports that many children will need and families, and we're all living through that, and we are optimistically in the turning the corner. So I want to share with those families who have emailed me that I hear you, I understand you. There are solutions, and you can talk to your building principal in terms of ways. I'm not allowed to encourage parents to opt out of testing, but PDE does provide um, information on their website that if you fit those qualifications that you can go do that. But um, we don't want you to balance that, the anxiety, especially having experienced that myself as a father for the first time with a child who was extremely concerned about testing and not being able to do well in testing and what that would mean to her, and gave her the choice to decide, you tell us what you want to do and we will follow you. So I just want to share that with families, and they can reach out like many of you I have, because I received those emails where you sent me information and you've copied the principals, but others who haven't copied their principals and just sent me their concerns, I encourage you to please reach out to your building principals and have that conversation. We know when it comes to a balancing act who the winner is going to be. I also want to share that our staff, our high school staff, or a vast majority of our high school staff, returned to their classrooms yesterday. As you know, we've been providing a hybrid experience or in-person experience for a significant number of our students in need. So those staff members have been here for some time at the high school, but as a result of us having to shift to a total remote, we're happy that our staff members were able to come back into the building and begin to gear up for April 19th. And our students coming back, and the first cohort of students coming back, and I'm excited to be out there at arrival, saying hello to our students as we wrap up the school year, and happy to be able to get some students who have not been in the building for a very, very long time back in the building, and parents who have emailed me and said, Dr. Marseille, even if it's just one day for my child, let's see if we can make that happen. So I'm optimistic about that. But optimism is on itself, we need to be mindful that staffing continues to be a challenge, right? So at any point in time, and I say staffing, and it's not, and I say that specifically, not a particular category, it's all staffing. So even if all of our teachers show up that day, there's hundreds of other individuals who are needed to support the day-to-day operations of the building, that if they are not present, makes it literally impossible or extremely challenging to do that. And so we're continuing to monitor that. And as soon as we find out information with respect to that, we will share that with you. But until we get out of COVID-19, that will continue to be a reality for us. But the optimism is here. And as we think about, sometimes it would appear that we take 2 steps forward, takes 2 steps back in terms of resurgence and numbers going back up and then they go back down. But there's answers to those challenges. And as we're rolling out vaccination, and as Pennsylvania is now looking at vaccination of 16-year-olds and up, is promising for those who are willing to engage in that conversation with their family at 16-year-olds and up. And then obviously next week, making sure that this week and the following week that everyone would be available for a vaccine. I know there's been conversation with regards to school districts in Delaware County who have partnered up with pharmacies to be student distribution hubs to provide vaccination to students. Montgomery County is not there yet. There's conversation that occurred this afternoon with the superintendents about how do we go about facilitating that now that there is access to 16-year-olds and up. Dr. Horsey and her team are doing an absolutely phenomenal job, and our nursing staff, in keeping track of opportunities to mitigate by providing information for vaccination, providing information for antigen testing. And we started that in March, and her team, made up with our nurses and Mrs. Jackson, have been really intentional, deliberate, and their partners around Montgomery County, creating a wonderful schedule in terms of wanting to make sure that we provide antigen testing for our staff. Currently, the team is working on what does that look like for a certain group of students, especially our seniors, maybe some of our athletes as we end that. We have end of the year events that are coming up that we'd like to want to move forward and provide testing. We don't want to jeopardize graduation with any large activities that may become a super spreader and impact that event. So we have to be intentional and deliberate about the way in which we are trying to organize our students. I'm in support of that, but I'm also wary in terms of what the unintended consequences may be if we're not careful. And continuing on the same lines with the work that Dr. Horsey's doing, I want to remind individuals about kindergarten registration. That is on, information is on our website that begins May 3rd. And, that second bullet on the slide is extremely important because every year I've been here, I get into that conversation. Your child must be 5 years old on or before September 1st. There's not a perfect answer for some families who are saying, well, I'm really close, I don't understand. Can you make an exception, right? And we get a couple of those every year, but that's where we are with that process. So please, and any support that your family may need in that process, Dr. Horsey's office and her team are more than willing and ready and able to support you. And then before I end and show you slides for upcoming meetings and encourage you to attend, tonight there are a number of agenda topics up for board recommendation. But I want to speak to this one specifically. And thank all of the administrators and teachers and parents and others who played a role in helping to launch so many interviews that we had looking for the right individual for our students, for our building, for our community. And we had a number of talented individuals near and far who wanted to call Cheltenham home. And I'm happy, and I was sharing with the board that there are some recommendations tonight where Mr. Metcalf, I will be recommending Mr. Metcalf as the next proud principal of Cedarbrook, and look forward to his leadership, his strong experience at the middle and high school year, understanding of flexible scheduling. He's a visionary, he's a strategic thinker, evidence of transformation in terms of outcomes. Obviously, his work around equity is spectacular in light of where we are and building partnerships with community and others. And I also want to thank Mr. Taylor for all the work that he's done and recognize the indelible impression that he has left on all of us. And in light of that, I felt it was important to think about what does that mean for our entire team and the board's commitment about building capacity, especially internal capacity. And what happens when you have talent and how do you nurture that talent, support that talent? Well, what I will be presenting to the board is a number of shifts. I think will work out mutually beneficial for all parties in the best interest of our students. It allows for a group of individuals who fully understand our students and our community. So as Mr. Metcalf transitions from the high school, beginning tomorrow morning, and I'm sure Dr. Smith and Ms. Collins and their team are going to start planning transition meetings between now and July 1st when people officially take their seat. But a lot has to happen between now and then. I've decided that I will be presenting to the board that Mr. Taylor stay as vice principal at Cedarbrook. And because we need a high school vice principal, and because Mr. Byron Ryan came to us with extensive experience from a large ninth grade academy and understanding that, I felt in all the information that was presented to me and brought to me that this three-way shift was a great opportunity for the district to maximize all of its talents and support the best interest of its students. So that will be on the agenda tonight for specifically Mr. Metcalf and Mr. Taylor. So I'm going to give a little bit of context as some of those agenda items are listed and will be voted on. And as always, we encourage you to please stay engaged. I've said what I love about the Zoom sessions is the ability to allow more of our community members to participate. Whether you are in your living room, whether you're in your office, whether you're on your phone, whether dinner's in the background, whether children are in the background, you're able to at least find a device, hit play, and do multiple things and try to do what all of us do, and that's juggle 3 or 4 things at the same time. So we encourage you to try hard to get onto that link and hit play. And if we're not in your immediate purview, at least you can hear some of it in the background, and something interesting you can jump in right away. So I encourage you to continue to do that. And with that, Mr. Fishbein, that concludes my my superintendent's report for this month.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marseille. That will take us to public comments on agenda items only. For those who are, oh wait, Ms. Lohman has her hand raised before we move to public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein.
Yeah.
I just had a question about the timing of the standardized testing and the reopening of the high school. Believe the one slide regarding the standardized testing said that it will take place during the week of April 19th. I think that's also the same week that Cheltenham High School will be reopening. So I'm wondering sort of what the Keystone exam, implementation is going to look like there, or how that's going to impact, if impact at all, the reopening of the high school.
That's a good question. I'll defer to Dr. Smith. I don't have the exact, though that's the window, I don't have the exact time of each of the testing dates. If you recall, PDE had granted larger windows of testing as a result of COVID-19. So maybe Dr. Smith can provide better clarity, and if not, we can come back to you and respond.
Good evening. To respond to your question, Ms. Lohman, it will not impact the high school opening, as the high school testing will not begin on the 19th. The 19th is strictly for PSSA at this time. Keystone will take place weeks later.
Thank you.
Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. My question also relates to the standardized testing logistics, and I was wondering how during the period of standardized testing will there be any impact on operation of the school buildings where standardized testing is occurring? Do we know at this point?
Be a little bit more specific, because even prior to COVID, there's always
Understood. I
operationalized
will be more
challenges with
Thank you.
testing in terms of finding rooms, finding
Let
proctors,
me be
things
more
of that nature.
understood.
Yeah.
Specifically, since there will be potentially additional students in person than we have had during COVID, will that impact other grades that are not taking tests in order to maintain social distancing?
I don't believe that's the case. The team is working on a schedule to support and mitigate some of the challenges that may come up as a result of that. But we don't see that as an overarching large problem.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Seeing no further board questions, I want to thank Dr. Marseille for all the work that's going into testing, and I think that makes us much safer, and I'm excited to know that the district is playing a role in that for our students and staff. Now it's time for public comments on agenda items, and for those who are on Zoom, if you raise your hand, we will unmute you, and then you can say your question out loud. For those who are participating through a streaming service, and only those who are participating through a streaming service, you can send your questions to CSD board meeting comments at cheltenham.org. The address is on your screen, and we will read and then answer those questions. I'm looking at participants. Attendees, there's one raised hand. Autumn Angeletti has her hand raised. Can you unmute her?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
We can.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Autumn Angeletti. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Cheltenham alumna of 2017, a current resident of Elkins Park, and a member of Police for CSD. I'm commenting to express my gratitude as well to Dr. Marseille. Dr. Marseille became superintendent during my sophomore year of high school, and during that brief time, he attended our Women's Student Union meetings. He spoke at a Black Scholars induction ceremony, and he entertained several meetings with me and my peers to discuss school climate, dress code, the health curriculum, and present-day police-free schools. Dr. Marseille, I cannot thank you enough for the positive impact you've had on my life and the lives of other students. Dr. Marseille's noteworthy dedication to serving the students of Cheltenham School District will be deeply missed. To the school board, I'm sure you know this search will be quite challenging as these are big shoes to fill. So on behalf of Police for CSD, I'd like to know if and how Dr. Marseille's resignation may impact ongoing MOU negotiations, knowing the document that goes into effect in July requires the signature of the superintendent. We'd also like to know how you intend to include the community in your search for a new superintendent, and if you know yet, what particular factors may be included in your search. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind comments and for your questions. I don't think we're prepared to answer those questions. I may need to speak with legal counsel about one of them, and there will be a board discussion about the criteria that we're setting up to search for the new superintendent, and that will be a transparent process that we will communicate in a timely manner. Dr. Marseille, did you have anything to add to that, or?
Well, first, thank you for the kind words. You've left an indelible impression on me as well, and you are a star, like all of your other classmates. I've always shared with boards, Autumn, that um, the mission and vision does not rest at a particular seat, because those individuals in those seats shift, but not your moral compass and your commitment. Um, but without getting into details, I know that this board is deeply committed to equity, access, and opportunity. And I know that we have individuals on this team, uh, Dr. Smith, Dr. Horsey, Ms. Jackson, Ms. Collins, Dr. Gallagher, Mr. Teasdale, Mr. Barone, Mr. Kaufman, um, and who am I missing on my cabinet, Dr. Smith? So as I'm going down the list of individuals all the way down to the principals, when I say, Autumn, we see you and we hear you, it's not an understatement. And uh, uh, the board's committed to that work and making sure that happens. The team has set that foundation. Even if by any stretch of the imagination something happens and someone doesn't come here with that ethos, I find it impossible. Our team, um, uh, led by Dr. Smith and others, are committed to this work. And I'm sure that the board will identify a designee to sign that document if I'm not able to sign that document. And I know that there's been, um, uh, at a policy level, we do want to bring it to the policy meeting. And we invite those to our policy to really dig in and dive into that. I think that um, police, free CSD, um, though may not be 100% satisfied with maybe not seeing all of your recommendations in there, but we have taken a red line to a significant amount of that and thought critically through your recommendations, and some of those areas we absolutely followed suit. Others we met halfway, and we're anticipate and look forward to sharing that document with you and the rest of the community for additional input. I do want to say that we um, um, and maybe at this point, Autumn, um, I'm not sure if we're on polar sides of this equation, but I do think that policing, when done right, is good, and we need police. Where we're 100% on board with each other is mitigating the negative contact that often occurs with Black and Brown children. And even those who may not understand as negativity, um, the trauma that brings. And as recently, I don't have to tell you the most recent incident, I'm not going to go into that. And the one before that, where as a person of color, how your heart rate accelerates significantly when I'll speak for myself, when you are younger and you see a police officer and you're thinking about, are they going to stop me, or are they going to question me, and what are they going to say and how they're going to say it, and are they going to believe me, or are they going to believe her, or are they going to believe him? That's a very heavy bag to carry all your life, and most people don't understand that. So we are committed, and this board remains committed, and this administration remains committed to working with you to try to mitigate those negative experiences. And once we tackle this challenge around police free CSD, I hope you stick around and help us tackle other challenges and other institutionalized and systemic ways in which we perpetuate racism in our country. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Fishbein, for allowing me to respond.
You're welcome. That Autumn's was the only raised hand. Oh, we just got a new raised hand. just in the nick of time. Phaedra Brown, could you unmute her, Mr. Kaufman?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Phaedra Brown, and I am a parent of 4 children in Cheltenham. One. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yes, we can.
You faded out, but now you're back.
Okay.
And if you could, and I forgot to announce this when Ms. Angeletti asked her question, but if you would please identify where in the township you reside.
Sure. Again, Dr. Phaedra Brown. I'm in the Wincote section, right in the Wingate homes. And I have an oldest daughter, Amani Harris, who graduated in 2017. She's now a senior at Bowie State. Latif J. Harris just graduated. He's a freshman at East Stroudsburg. And now my baby girl, Amira Harris, is in the 11th grade. And my baby boy, Jordan, is in the 10th grade, the president of his class.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but you got to let me know what you need. I know some people on that campus at Bowie State who can provide additional support. So I know some folks who will make sure that they're taken care of over there.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille.
We'll follow up.
I appreciate it. And that takes me to you. Thank you so much for being a wonderful example to my 2 African-American sons. You showing up every day in a suit and tie early. You're there when I used to drop them off. You have always been supportive whenever I needed you. And I appreciate that from both you and Mr. Metcalf. Some of my children have run into issues that teenagers do, and I was always met with professionalism, especially from Mr. Metcalf, and always put out fires, and especially to Dr. Thomas Smith, who professionally put out any fires as well and gave support and was also preventive in things. And that leads me to my question. In the midst of PSSA testing and the other testing and the other arduous vicissitudes of a pandemic, would it be easier to just allow Dr. Thomas Smith to take the role as interim superintendent, since she's been there, she's familiar with everything, and it would just make things easier? I'm asking if it would make things easier for the rest of the administration and teachers to continue doing what they have to do and getting back to some type of normalcy, and worry about hiring outside people later, like for the meantime and between time. I was just wondering. But again, thank you for everything, Dr. Thomas Smith, Dr. Marseille, and Mr. Metcalf, and for all the board members. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. That is a question addressed to the board, so I will take it. We have not made any decision about the interim, and we are considering our options, and we will communicate when we've made a decision. But thank you for your input. There's now more hands raised. And I'll call on the order that I see them. Kelly Wyatt, and can you start out once you're unmuted by Mr. Kaufman by telling us where in the township you reside?
Hi, I'm in Cheltenham Township as well. I actually have 2 sons that attend the district. And I raised my hand because I have a lot of the same concerns that Dr. Brown just spoke of. Dr. Marseille, I do appreciate everything you've done for our boys, especially with transitioning in today's youth, with social media, and just knowing how to grow up in today's world. My second concern is, with Mr. Metcalf. While part of me would hate to lose him at Cheltenham High School, the reform that's needed in the middle school to prepare these kids, period, for high school, Mr. Metcalf is needed for. But the second part, or the trifecta piece of this entire thing, is with Dr. Smith being named interim superintendent, because she have done stellar work alongside Dr. Marseille. And we already know the blemish that was done in the media 3 years ago, and how the high school was reformed. To bring somebody into that while still cultivating the community and progressing that community. How do we bring somebody new into that versus somebody who understands the work, who have done the work. Our kids know them, they know our kids, they understand the families, and they're bridging not only a different level of socialism with social media, but it's all inclusive with teaching philosophies and pedagogy, where everybody is being held accountable, not just the parents, not just the kids, but the teachers as well. So that's my concern, as I now have a freshman son and a junior son in the high school. My oldest boy is now out of the district, and I do see the difference from when he was in the district versus now my younger two. I'm a very active parent. I'm an educator as well. I've been with the school district of Philadelphia now for 23 years. So what I say, I'm not saying just as a biased parent. And these are some of the concerns that I've come to the high school with over the last 3 years as I watch my boys, progress in the high school, where there's some deficiencies there and some work that needed to be done. So I do applaud Mr. Metcalf, and that he always met my questions with results. I am very appreciative of Dr. Marseille and even Dr. Smith for understanding what I wanted for my sons. And it's not just as a mother, but it's as a teacher as well. Because again, I've been doing this for 23 years as well.
Thank you. I don't think you asked a question other than the one that I just answered, but I appreciate your comment. Dr. Marseille, did you have anything to add, or?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Okay. Next hand raised is Aaron X. Smith. Please tell me where in the township you reside.
Cheltenham Township. Greetings.
Okay.
I had a comment as well. First, I just want to thank Dr. Marseille personally, and I was always so encouraged by seeing someone in a leadership position of that nature, having, their own children, in that position. It just showed such a sincere appreciation for the capabilities of those who we're dealing with, our children on a daily basis. So I appreciate his commitment and sincerity and his service to the community. And also, with regards to the internal hiring, in this climate with so much change in terms of COVID-19 and all the adjustments that our young people have had to make. I'm currently a professor at Temple University, and I know how much the students are going through even as young adults. So I was just thinking of how important it would be to maintain as much consistency as possible, especially with the unique needs of township, so special in so many ways, where people who understand our children and our community are often best prepared, to service them, especially in times like this. So just to thank Dr. Marseille and to give, I guess, an additional vote of confidence for the potential to seriously consider Dr. Smith also. And just thank you for your time. Thank you to the board and all the participants on the stream tonight. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more raised hands of attendees. We have received a number of emails from people who are watching virtually who have either sent words of support for Mr. Metcalf's candidacy and then appointment to the principal position at Cedarbrook. And then we have one more comment about Dr. Smith as interim that is repetitive of the three that we heard live. So we will use our discretion not to read it because it will just lengthen the meeting with the same or similar sentiments that we've addressed already. But we're noting for the record that they were made. Mr. Roos, is that in order? Can we move on to the next agenda item, or?
Yes, you may.
Okay. And thank you to the public for the words of support and the input into our next steps. We appreciate it and we hear you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of both the January 9th, 2021 legislative meeting and the March 9th, 2021 legislative meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I second that motion.
Chris Pender first, Julie Haywood second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. That takes us to the committee reports, and I'm up first with Financial Affairs. The Financial Affairs Committee met on April 6, 2021 virtually. And after roll call and approval of the minutes, we went through 5 budget items. The first was an update on the 2021 budget. The second was an update on charter school costs. We then spent time reviewing some data analytics that compare us to our neighboring and peer districts based on demographics, staffing, and special education. We then reviewed the budget process for 2021, 2022, and some preliminary numbers with respect to that. Regarding the 2020-2021 budget, our revenues are down, and there's some question about the state monies, but we're hopeful and anticipating getting what we budgeted from the state. Our local revenues are near almost exactly what they were last year. And our federal sources have increased pretty substantially because of money that has been allocated due to the pandemic. We are experiencing about at budget expenses. One of our big expenses that we are focused on always is our debt. And we reported last year that we did a refinancing that caused us to save some money last year and this year. There is a slide, if you'd like to see it, it is in the meeting section of board documents that shows our debt as we anticipate it over the next 20 years. And it will be pretty level at 10 million or 10 million 100, or close to between 10 and 11 million every year. And that is money that we borrowed and are now paying back to build the schools mostly. We have some areas where we're looking to adjust expenses to eliminate what we routinely call our structural deficit. And we have been focused for years on trying to eliminate that by finding places to save money. We have planned to look at transportation, facilities, health care benefits, and life insurance. This year, because of a change in enrollment, we are experiencing a reduction in our Eastern School for Science and Technology tuition. And we are currently talking about another restructuring of our debt that will have the potential to save us money in next tax year, next fiscal year. And another place that we hope to look to save money is when teachers retire, not replacing them. If educationally it won't impact the delivery of instruction. So the board is committed to making sure that we are fiscally sound, and those are some areas of possible budget reduction. We have also done some good work in increasing our revenues, and thanks to our solicitor's office, we have litigated and then settled some tax appeals where we are going to be seeing a significant increase of more than $1.5 million in tax collections because of those assessment appeals. We are in line to get some more federal money, but that federal money, which could amount to as much as $4 million, comes with many strings attached, and we are evaluating whether we can use any of it for our normal obligations, and if not, whether there are COVID-related expenses that we may be able to allocate some of that money to, so that we can get the benefit of the money that the federal government has set aside for us. The next item on that was it for this year's budget. The next item was charter school tuition, and that has been something we've talked about most legislative meetings. We have experienced a dramatic increase in charter school enrollment, and because of the really horrible way that Pennsylvania treats school districts with respect to charter schools, every student that leaves, we have to pay money to an entity out of our coffers. Out of our taxpayers' money goes the tuition for each student who leaves to go to a charter school. And that's true of charter schools that are brick and mortar and charter schools that are cyber charter. There is legislation proposed to change that, or to limit it at least. But this year, our actual budget, our actual expenditures for charter school tuitions went up from $1,360,000 to $3,096,000. And because of that increase, when we budget for next year, prudent budgeting requires us to budget the over $3 million in case that situation continues. So, two messages. One, make sure your state legislator knows how important legislation that changes this formula is to you as a taxpayer and as a consumer of our school district's services. And then also, excuse me, let's work together to tell our neighbors that the school's programming after we returned in the fall has been stellar and exceeding that can be provided at the charter schools that we compete with. If the proposed legislation were to pass and limit cyber charter school tuition to $9,500, which is what's proposed, we would stand to save $1,100,000 this year. So that's how important that legislation is. That's it for charter schools. Next, we talked about the data analytics that compare us to neighboring districts with similar sized student populations. And we have an extraordinarily high number of special education students compared to our neighbors. And we also have a high percentage of low-income students who may come to school with more challenges. We have very high staffing ratios. student to teacher ratios, and we have high administrator to student ratios, which we are now that we are confronted with this data, we have ways to make decisions that may be impacted by the data. We also have a very, the special education enrollment has gone up over time, year to year. And also the special education students who require extensive supports has also gone up, which all increased our costs. And that cost is required by the federal law for us to incur, but it's not funded, except we get some funding from the state, nothing from the federal government on that, even though that's a federal law that requires that we do it. We have a moral obligation to do it as well, but it's a very costly obligation. The 2020-2022 budget is coming into shape. It will be a budget that's about $2 million more than the 2020-2021 budget because of expenses that are built into our budget, like teachers' contracts, BEC contracts, and transportation services. But we will be looking where, as I've talked about earlier, we can save money in all of those buckets. There will be great news if the governor's budget is passed and we get the kind of education funding that will bring Pennsylvania closer to our peer states in education funding. And we will have much less to worry about financially if that budget were to pass, but that is not something we can count on. It is frequently proposed and never passes. Hopefully this year will be different. We had one action item that we talked about already, the appointment of Leo Kim as board treasurer. And we also will be needing to talk about contract extension for Chartwell's food service, which it was up for renewal this year, but instead of renewing it, we're extending it, which was something that was permitted because of COVID. And that completes my report. The next Financial Affairs Committee meeting will follow the Facilities Committee meeting, which starts at 7 p.m. on May 4th. And that concludes my report. Next on the agenda is Educational Affairs, and we'll be hearing from both Ms. Lohman and Mr. Pender.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. I think I'm reporting on both facets of the Educational Affairs Committee meeting. But if I'm not, hopefully someone will tell me that.
No, I heard that from someone else, but if you're prepared to present on both, we're happy to hear you.
Okay. And certainly, Mr. Pender, if there's something you'd like to add, please step in, because this was a long meeting. The Educational Affairs Committee met via Zoom on Tuesday, March 16th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. 8 members of the public attended the meeting. After roll call and approval of the minutes from the February 16th, 2021 meeting, the meeting went on to cover 2 topics. The first topic was changes to the English language arts curriculum at Cedarbrook. And the second topic was mental health supports for students, including the impact of trauma on the brain and consideration of a multi-tiered system of mental health support in the district and what that looks like in practice, and a review of the district's, an assessment of the district's needs in terms of providing mental health support to its students. The slides used at the meeting will be available on the district's website, and I point this out because this was a very information heavy meeting in terms of information provided on the slides. The slides are available at https://www.cheltenham.org/page, capital PAGE /2643. I also just read that because I personally I always have a little bit of trouble navigating to figure out where they are. If you search Educational Affairs Committee, they will come up as well. The slides from the February 16th Educational Affairs Committee are posted at that site right now. The slides from the March 16th meeting are not up there yet, but they should be up there soon. I just want to point out the February 16th presentation was about class rank and course weight recommendations at Cheltenham High School. That is up on our website, and the administration has already presented on the CBK English Language Arts curriculum the proposed changes, and on the proposed changes to class rank and course weights at an April 6th meeting to the public, and then there's going to be another meeting about those two topics: ELA curriculum changes at Cedar Brook and class rank and course weight changes at the high school, which is going to occur on Tuesday, April 27th from 6:30 to 8:30 via Zoom. It's entitled Secondary Education Updates if you go and look for it on the district's calendar. But that's what that meeting will be about. So that this March 16th meeting covered part of what that April 27th meeting will also review, which is changes to the English Language Arts curriculum at Cedar Brook. At the March 16th meeting, Ms. Charlene Collins, the district's director of secondary education, presented on the changes proposed to the English Language Arts curriculum at Cedar Brook. The current curriculum includes the following courses: English 7, and also this goes for English 8 too, grade level course, an English 7 learning support class for students with IEPs whose IEP team has determined that they need the specialized services available to them in that type of setting, and then an enriched English class. So there were three kind of tracks, if you will: grade level English, learning support, and enriched English. Also offered at Cedar Brook are English as a second language, which is support for children who are for whom English is obviously not their first language spoken at home, and they are English language learners. And then there's also a reading class for students with difficulty in reading comprehension, and a class called Literary Workshop, for whom it was determined that students didn't need further instruction in reading, but they needed more literacy experiences. And students who were placed in that class had to take it in lieu of taking a world language. So if you were in the literary workshop class, you were unable to take Spanish or any of the other offerings in world language at Cedar Brook. The new proposal is to collapse grade level and enriched English classes into one class, to have just a English 7 class and an English 8 class, both of which are aligned with the Pennsylvania Common Core standards. Will include an emphasis on writing as well. Students will have core texts and independent texts that they can choose from, culturally relevant texts at their reading levels. In addition, book clubs are being integrated into the ELA curriculum to allow students to engage with different types of texts. The proposal to collapse grade level and enriched English classes into one class, this proposal also will eliminate the literary workshop, because it did not provide data on student progress and growth, and expectations for students in that class had been kept at a very low level, in addition to which they had been unable to take a world language as a result of being placed in that class. Cedar Brook will continue to offer their English as a second language classes, their learning support classes for students with IEPs who need a certain level of support in English and reading, and then their reading class, which utilizes evidence-based interventions, including Read 180 and Wilson Reading, to support students who need more support with reading comprehension. So basically what this proposal does is eliminates tracking by ability in English language arts at Cedar Brook. This really is an issue of equity. The lower tracked English classes at Cedar Brook were not found to be challenging for the students in those classes, and those students were falling farther behind. So when it came time for them to enroll in English classes at CHS, they were already very far behind. So there was clear evidence that what we were doing now in terms of our English tracking was not effective in meeting all students' needs. So that was one of the impetuses for the proposal to collapse these classes together to make sure that all kids received challenging coursework that was aligned with Pennsylvania Common Core standards. There were a variety of board questions that were related to this proposal. I would really recommend that I believe that our committee meetings are recorded and then posted on our website. If someone could confirm that for me, I would appreciate that, because I would really recommend it if you're interested in this topic. Either listen to this or go to the presentation about it that's going to occur on April 27th. If you have students who are impacted, or if you want to know more about what this really means for students at Cedar Brook, these changes to the ELA curriculum, I would really recommend that you actually listen to the presentation from the experts. Because the other thing about this March 16th meeting was that the second half of it was about how our district is supporting the mental health of our students. And during the second half of the meeting, Dr. Horsey, the district's director of student services, and several organizations with which the district has been partnering spoke about trauma and its impact on the brain, and the impact of COVID-19, the traumatic impact of COVID-19 on our students. So initially, Dr. Horsey set the stage, and then the director of the Lakeside Neurologic Initiative presented on trauma and its impact on the brain. It was a fascinating discussion that I will do a very poor job summarizing. So I'd really recommend it if people to look at the slides when they're available on the website, and also listen to the presentation if possible. I really wish that more people, members of the public, had been present at this meeting, because this was a really fascinating discussion about the impact of trauma on the brain and what it means for student behavior in class, and how the importance of people who are working with children to understand how behaviors can manifest themselves as a result of the trauma that students experience. So that was the first part of that presentation. Then representatives from Effective School Solutions, which is a mental health support provider, talked about the traumatic impact of COVID-19 on our students. And then they also talked about best practices in the implementation of a mental health continuum to support students in the district. And they also reviewed the results of a mental health readiness assessment that Effective School Solutions conducted in the district. Again, this was chock full of some really important and detailed information, this discussion. I would really recommend that the slides from the second half of the discussion, I believe there were 38 slides from that discussion, and they were very detailed, and I would strongly encourage people to take a look at it. I will briefly summarize the review of what is called multi-tiered systems of support for mental health. Is what it looks like a triangle, and it's what one of the representatives of Effective School Solutions reviewed, in that the bottom part of the triangle in any sort of framework for mental health support in schools is the foundational support, which includes mental health vision and planning, which includes a needs assessment and a mental health strategic plan. And then the second tier, called Tier 1, is the provision of mental health awareness programs and prevention in schools. And then Tier 2 would be a level of care and crisis screening that would provide programming for students with mild to moderate challenges in school. And then tier 3 would be intensive in-school clinical support for students with the highest level of mental health needs in school before they would have to go out to an out-of-district placement. So there was quite a bit of discussion about what those tiers look like and the profile of a typical tier 3 student, the ones who have the most significant needs and the best practices in tier 3 for student needs. And then we also reviewed, as I said, the results of a preliminary mental health readiness assessment that Effective School Solutions conducted for our district. And they spoke with staff members. Though I will note, and they did note this as well, the one key constituent that was not part of their assessment were students or families, but if we were to bring them in to do additional work into our district, they would include that as well. Their recommendations for our district were that we needed to create a comprehensive mental health action plan and ensure that there is strong mental health component to district reentry plans for the coming school year, meaning we need to be able to support students who are coming back from being, especially our high school students, more or less out of school for an entire year, over an entire year. And we need to document standardized implementation criteria for all interventions in each one of those tiers. Their second recommendation was to fill that top tier 3 gap, that our district definitely needs to undertake a comprehensive effort to build an in-district tier 3 capability, which will significantly decrease the risk of future increases in out-of-district placements. As Mr. Fishbein mentioned, we pay a significant amount of money for out-of-district placements for children with a variety of special education needs, in particular students with significant emotional disabilities. So they recommend that we fill this gap of providing in-district tier 3 supports to reduce those out-of-district placements and actually also reduce overclassification in the first place of kids as in need of special education. Their third recommendation is to ensure that tier 2 is adequately staffed. We need to make sure sufficient counseling capacity exists to address increased number of students who will present with mental health challenges, particularly upon return to school. And number 4 was to create a professional development continuum with a focus on trauma-attuned practices and mental health awareness. They recommend that we plan and implement a full-year continuum of professional learning beginning this spring and to prepare for return to a more normalized schooling and continuing through 2021-2022. As I said, that is a very high-level overview of what was discussed at this meeting. There was a great deal of detail with regard to what it looks like to have a tier 3 level of support in district and what that might cost and how we might be able to fund that. And again, like I said, the first half of that, the presentation on the impact of trauma on the brain was really, to me personally, fascinating, and I would recommend that people look at that. The meeting adjourned at approximately 9:40. The next Educational Affairs Committee meeting will be held via Zoom on Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. Oh, and I just am looking at a note. Committee meetings are not posted to the website or to social media. Okay, so I don't think that recordings of committee meetings are posted anywhere, but the slides will definitely be posted, and they are extremely detailed. And I also just personally want to thank Dr. Horsey for making that presentation happen. The individuals that she brought in to talk about where we are at with our mental health supports in the district and what needs to happen to move forward were extremely knowledgeable and really were very patient with us in answering questions. And it was just a really, to me, a very helpful and useful presentation. So thank you for that. And that concludes my report.
I do want to add one thing. I think you did a great job covering that stuff, Ms. Lohman. I want to point out slide 18 in the second half. And I want to also say thank you to Dr. Horsey because they addressed a lot of issues on that slide that we heard from the public. academic stressors, social isolation, anxiety about COVID-19, and family and economic stressors. And that slide was talking about the traumatic impact of COVID-19. So I think they did a great job, a phenomenal job of listening to the community and added that in the report. But I thought you did a phenomenal job. You covered everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pender. Again, like I said, there was just a lot of detail in those presentations. So if you can take a look at the slides, I would definitely recommend it. That ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. And to the board members who might have their mics on, if you could make sure to mute yourself when you're not talking so that there's no background noise. I got a suggestion about that. And Ms. Lohman, you read the URL for the place on the website. I'm going to try and describe it so that people might navigate there themselves. There is a along the banner on the home page, there's a tab that says School Board. If you click that, there's on the left-hand side a column that has the third entry is Board Docs. And you click that, and then on the top, there's a tab that says Meetings, and you click that. And the meetings are then listed on the left-hand side of the page, and you can click on to what meeting you're looking for, and the presentations are posted in the meeting agenda itself. And when I'm reporting on financial affairs, I don't want to read a list of numbers because I think that doesn't really reach people when they're at a meeting. But if you want and are interested in knowing the numbers that we talked about at those meetings, or the detail that Ms. Lohman summarized at affairs, that would be the place you would look. And I commend all people who are taking the time to be here to do that so that you'll get a fuller idea of what happened at the committee meetings. Next on the agenda is facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. Facilities Committee met on April 6th, following financial affairs. And we talked about, we had a presentation on building maintenance updates and a lot about energy consumption and future planning. We had a building update as we have every month, and this included update on the high school. The cooling tower startup is completed. This is necessary for ventilation within the building, cooling within the building, the part of the building that is air conditioned. Electrician has installed wiring for IT upgrades for student usage in the cafeteria and Stretton Hall, so long as we continue under this period of social distancing. DeHuey Engineering has worked on the timeline and proposed work on Stretton Hall, external wall. The external wall on Stretton Hall that faces out towards Rice's Mill had a failure. A piece of rock or cement had fallen, and they have gone in and looked at it. Repairs will be made. A bid was put out. Bid was advertised on April 2nd. Bids will be received at the end of the month, and the plan is to award a bid to repair these sections of cantilever on the exterior of Stretton Hall, hopefully during the May meeting. This has been an issue that has slowly happened over the past few years. This is one of the challenges of a 63-year-old building. There was, Cedar Brook had some trees that need to be looked at by the arborist due to damage created by the spotted lanternfly. Glenside Elementary had repairs done to its cooling tower. Existing parts were available, which helped with cost savings. That work is done, and that building is set for the warm season. Cheltenham Elementary cooling tower startup was complete. Windcote, an alternative option for the glycol pipe repair, is being considered. We've spent a lot of time talking about the glycol pipe. This is a part of the, the cooling system that also is attached to a tower that has been leaking. And we have been waiting to get enough information that a bid was put together. We will have an action item tonight to approve the lowest bid at $80,000. Essentially, what's happening is the way the pipe was initially installed is flawed. There is damage to the pipe that is not easily reached, or it's cost prohibitive. So we will hire a contractor who will run a new line for this cooling fluid out of the building, across the parking lot, and over to the cooling tower where it is placed. We also had discussion about trees around Wyncote. There's a large tree there that is going to be removed if it has not been already. There's trees, as I said, at Cedar Brook. We're having a lot of issues with spotted lanternflies and other pestilence, not only on our campuses, but across the area. And our facilities director and staff are staying on top of these trees, monitoring them, making certain that damaged trees are taken care of and removed as need be. We had a discussion next about a presentation about energy services cost reduction options. Mr. Teasdale, our director of facilities, has been investigating the costs that we have across the district for the energy that we use, both electric and gas, and has come up with some proposals to try to help us reduce the costs that we spend for energy. He has presented to the board during this meeting several different options ranging from 2 months out to, or 2 years out to 4 years, signing up for contracts for electricity and for natural gas. And the longer out we go, the lower the rate is that we can lock into. However, there was a lot of discussion about an audit. There was board questions were asked about renewable energy and what can we do, what might we look for in contractors. We were told by Mr. Teasdale that 18% of the generated energy that our school district uses, and all school districts, must be renewable. So we were pleased to find out that there is some effort in place already, but we are looking to continue to use more renewable energies in our buildings. The board also talked about having an audit. There were questions about having an energy audit, what we might find and learn from that. And Mr. Teasdale agreed and has been looking at that as well, that an energy audit would present us with hard data in terms of what are we using, what is the efficiency of the different buildings, and what improvements might we make as investments in the future going forward to reduce our energy consumption, because that is a big issue with our large buildings. There was questions about solar. Could we have solar energy to generate electricity? And that is something else that is being investigated. The interest of the board and the momentum of the board is to try to get off the grid as much as is possible. Our newer buildings are highly energy efficient. Cedar Brook, the latest building that we opened, is 98% energy efficient. That building is also heated and cooled by the earth with a system that was installed under the parking lot that draws hot and cool air out of the earth, reducing the energy that would generate that. There was questions about facility usage from the board. There was a question asked specifically, do we have language on our website concerning CDC guidelines? Mr. Teasdale told us that yes, that was on the website, that everybody who uses our property, our facilities, needs to follow the health and safety plan. They have to have a health and safety plan of their own if they're going to be using it on a regular basis. There was a question about playgrounds, tennis courts, and basketball courts, other things that had been locked up. And Mr. Teasdale and Dr. Mercé responded that facilities have been made more available over time. Some of our playground property has been open, although people respected staying off of it early on in the pandemic, but over time, as things have changed, there is an increase in facility usage, and the aim and the board is to make return our facilities to use to the community when it is safe, because these are important places in our community for people to recreate and to spend time. Lastly, we had a discussion about a renewable energy position that the board is developing, a resolution, and that has been in process over the last 2 to 3 years. This was brought to us by a neighbor of the community. The board's paid particular attention to this discussion about moving towards renewable energy, doing what we can to reduce our carbon footprint. And that resolution is going to be prepared and available, presented next month in May. At the same time, the policy committee is working on policy for renewable energy. So there's a strong commitment, what I'm trying to say, by the board and the administration to our community to do what we can and continue to do what we can to reduce the carbon footprint, use more renewable energy, and teach these things at the same time. We have curriculum that's being developed for climate and other areas. That was it for the meeting. Our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, May the 4th at 7 p.m. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. England. Next up, liaison group, Mr. Cohen.
I'm sorry, before that, I believe there's an action item.
There is an action item. Mr. England, would you like to explain the action item? And
yes, I would.
Motion?
Thank you. The action item, I'm trying to find my agenda.
I can handle it if you'd like. I have it up.
The action item is to accept the bid. I apologize for the lowest bid of, man, this is not my night. The administration recommends approval of the Wyncote Elementary School cooling tower piping repair at a cost of $80,000 to be performed by McClure Company upon solicitor approval of the contract.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve, Julie Haywood.
Second, Charles Burdell Williams.
Is there any board discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Cohen. And now you are up for liaison group.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. For liaison group, the March meeting was canceled. The April meeting is scheduled for April 19th at 8 a.m. And that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Next is communication, and that is me. The Communications Committee met on March 25th, 2021.
Mr. Fishbein, point of order, I believe the policy committee is next.
My bad.
Unless I misread
no, you are right, and it's so small I missed it, and I apologize. Thank you. 2 mistakes in a row caught by fellow board members. Thank you for paying such close attention. Policy.
There was a reason I was paying close attention, though.
You didn't want to be silenced.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. The policy committee met on March 24th at 8 a.m. via Zoom. Following roll call and approval of minutes, the committee first discussed policies 309, 409, and 509, which are being consolidated into a new policy numbered 309. And their titles all were assignment and transfer. And the policies related to the nature in which a member of staff can be assigned or transferred based on management, supervisory, instructional, and operational needs of the district. The next item was policy and AR 140, charter schools, which is an update to a current policy. This policy outlines the process followed by the district when considering charter school applications. And then there was policy and AR 219, student complaint process, which describes the process by which a student can make a complaint known to a staff member, or if not comfortable making a complaint known to a staff member, proceed through the process, which ultimately escalates the complaint through the chain of command. This policy does not supersede, but rather works with other policies related to other forms of complaint. And it also does not replace the student's ability to simply make a concern known in a less formal means. However, it offers a formal process by which a student can identify a violation of board policy. There was also a discussion of policy and AR 200, enrollment of students. This was a very lengthy discussion. These were all second read policies, all of the policies I've discussed so far, and this was the last item of old business. This policy is not being put forward tonight for adoption because there was some discussion regarding making sure that the policies, the steps outlined in the policy regarding residency checks reflects what administration is already doing and the great level of care during a sensitive situation that the administration follows, as well as a desire by the members of the policy committee to be sure that we are viewing the language and actions described in the policy through an equity lens. So this policy will be brought back to the policy committee with additional information. There was one item of new business in the time that remained, and that was policy 209, health and dental examinations, which is presented tonight for first read. So there is an action, the next policy committee meeting will be held on April 28th at 8:00 a.m. via Zoom. And before I conclude my report, there is an action item, which is the adoption of policy 309, the repeal of policy 409 and 509, because it is being consolidated, as well as the adoption of policy 140 and adoption of policy 219. So I would need a motion for the collective actions described.
Motion to approve, Charles Burdell Williams.
Seconded, Jennifer Lohman.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Like that passes. And that does conclude my report.
And now, if I can read the agenda correctly, it is communications, and that is me. The Communications Committee met on March 25th, 2021. And after a roll call and approval of the minutes, we discussed two topics. One was reopening, and we went through all of the numerous communications that have been coming out of the Central Administration Office about reopening, and then how things changed along the way. Again, you can find this presentation on the website where I described earlier. We communicated about the antigen testing pilot, which I'm pretty proud of. That was a community member reached out and let us know that that it was available through CHOP and through some quick action out of Dr. Horsey's office and Dr. Marseille's office. We got that done. And communicating about all of that is really important so that A, we know what's going on, and B, the community feels safer. So we talked about that and all of the communications around that. We talked about the town hall videos that were produced and are available on the website. The road to reopening is also on the website, so that if you have any questions about any of these communications, they're all there and collected by topic. And another thing about reopening that that was a board initiative that the communications office followed through on, and that is specifically Kevin Kaufman and in his office. We have a dashboard now that shows cases by month, cases by school, and the breakdown between students and staff in those cases and over time. And each time we get a communication about a new case that's disclosed in the community, which you all receive emails about if it pertains to your school, that is added to the dashboard, and it's an ongoing and constantly updated data set that is available to all who look for it. The next topic of conversation was board communications. And that is something that this board takes pretty seriously. We want to make sure that the community has a way to contact us, and that there is some procedure for hearing from us when you contact us. Again, I keep mentioning the website, but the website has full bios on each of us. It has blurbs about each of our meetings, and then again, the presentations from the meetings are posted after the meetings conclude. And again, this presentation actually shows the way to get to the place on the website where the meetings, agendas, and presentations can be found. There are also one-page documents that the communications office prepared answering questions about how the board functions and the way the board does its job on behalf of the district and the community. And we are proud to have hosted a couple of really well-attended town halls with both the students and through the great work of Julie Haywood with our state and federal legislators. That was really well attended and a great discussion where we received a lot of information from the people who make our laws. And we are back to now hybrid meetings, which you're invited to watch, but we will be in person, and it is my plan to be there as soon as I'm vaccinated. Another way that the board communicates its desires and beliefs is through resolutions. And we heard mention of one of those coming up next month about environmental initiatives, and that dovetails with our policy role. Another way that we communicate is through media relations, and we have been getting a lot of coverage during COVID about the work that we're doing in this district. And that is because we've made, Kevin Kaufman's office has made us an available source to be quoted in articles in the media about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And the very last thing we discussed is the board email and how we respond to it. When I first joined the board, there weren't even published emails. Now you can reach us all by going to one email, schoolboard@cheltenham.org, or reach any of us individually by our first initial and last name at cheltenham.org. And we are working on methodologies to ensure that emails that we receive get a response, either by pointing you to a frequently asked question page or by a direct response from the board. The next communications committee meeting will be April 22nd at 7 p.m. and that will be virtually. And that concludes my report. Next up is legislative, Ms. Haywood.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. This evening,
Wait, I have a correction. Mr.
okay.
Cohen, because he has a common name, has an email that's different from the rest of the board emails. His has his first initial, his middle initial, which is L, and then his last name Cohen. So DL Cohen at cheltenham.org. In case anybody wants to email him individually, he wanted to make sure that the email that you intend to send to him as a board member doesn't go to our teacher, Dave Cohen. So thank you for that, Mr. Cohen, and Ms. Haywood, you can take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. This evening, I'll provide a legislative update on federal and state legislation under consideration and other related matters. As you mentioned earlier, on March 15th, 2021, Cheltenham School Board and School District, along with Abington School District, hosted our first legislative town hall on public education. In attendance were Congresswoman Madeline Dean, State Senator Art Haywood, State Representatives Napoleon Nelson and Ben Sanchez. They joined a conversation where they heard from the superintendents and board presidents in Cheltenham, Abington, and Springfield about the challenges our school districts are facing, our points of pride, with an opportunity to ask questions related to charter school funding reform, federal and state funding of public education as well. All of the elected officials were in support of more equitable funding of public education and shared good news with respect to incoming financial resources to school districts that Mr. Fishbein reported earlier under the American Rescue Act. We look forward to continuing these conversations with our elected representatives and support legislation that addresses more equitable funding of public education. This legislative town hall was well attended by the community and students, and we hope to organize this as an annual event with different school districts hosting the event in the future. On March the 17th, the Montgomery County School District Legislative Committee met. At that meeting, we were joined by Dr. Frank Gallagher of the Learn Group, which is making great strides in getting messaging to superintendents and legislators about the need for charter school reform. As I mentioned last night, and as Mr. Fishbein and others mentioned this evening, our charter school costs have almost tripled this year, due in part to more students going to cyber charter schools because of COVID-19. During this meeting, we also learned the PSBA is focusing efforts on charter school reform, with Larry Feinberg heading up the Keystone Center for Charter Change. Extending these advocacy efforts, on Monday, March the 22nd, Bill England and I joined 2 school board members from Jenkintown for a virtual PSBA Advocacy Day. We met virtually with State Representative Napoleon Nelson and Senator Art Haywood's legislative director to discuss charter school funding reform, mandate waiver request, and equitable funding of public education. During these meetings, we urged the General Assembly to adopt permanent charter school funding reforms that are predictable, accurate, and reflect the actual cost to educate students in the regular and special education programs. We also requested support of Governor Wolf's proposed statewide flat fee or rate of $9,500 per student for regular education tuition for charter schools to ensure that taxpayers are not overpaying cyber charter schools. For charter special education tuition, we also asked the legislature to enact legislation to apply the tiered special education funding formula to charter schools as it does for school districts. If these proposals are adopted, Cheltenham School District, as Mr. Fishbein shared earlier, we would save over $1.1 million in charter school tuition payments. And again, I urge you, if you're listening in, to contact your elected official, State Representative Art Haywood, and State Senator Art Haywood, and State Representative Napoleon Nelson, and let them know your feelings about charter school funding reform and the impacts that will have directly in our school district. In terms of mandate relief, we also urge the state legislature to support Senate Bill 73 and a companion bill in the House, which would allow school districts to apply for a waiver from certain state-imposed mandates. Such waivers would allow school districts to properly account for the cost of implementing certain mandates without having to raise taxes, use reserve funds, or take steps to eliminate programs in order to implement unfunded mandates. Overall, in these meetings, Representative Nelson and Senator Haywood's legislative director expressed support for overall better funding of public education at the state level. Currently, just for the public to know, Cheltenham receives about 22% of our budget from the state to fund general and special education costs. Specifically, pensions, special education, and charter school tuition are mandated costs that have increased by a combined $6.8 billion statewide since 2007-2008. Given the relatively low funding of public education by the state, we are pressed into raising local taxes to ensure we properly fund education and that programming is not adversely impacted. Currently at the state level, the House of Representatives has passed legislation to provide temporary immunity from COVID-19 lawsuits. House Bill 605, introduced by Representative Ecker from Erie, provides a temporary grant of immunity for actual and potential COVID exposure in the school setting, unless such exposure is the result of gross negligence or willful misconduct on the part of public schools and school officials. Additionally, the U.S. Department of Education of Civil Rights has launched a comprehensive review of Title IX regulations. As Mr. Roos reported at our last meeting, the Office of Civil Rights is gathering public comments on the issue of sexual harassment in school environments, including sexual violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Lastly, the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Health announced recommendations for reopening K through 12 schools with different levels of COVID-19 transmission rates that are being looked at in each county. Again, these are only recommendations, but ones that are posted on the Department of Education website. And lastly, at the federal level, on April 9th, the Office of Management and Budget submitted President Biden's proposed funding request for the fiscal 22 year to Congress. The request proposes a $29.8 billion increase over fiscal year 21 levels of public education. 2/3 of the increase is intended for Title I, with $30 billion for special education funding. This proposed budget includes a sizable increase for Head Start and Child Care Development Block Grants. Again, we hope that budget passes close to what President Biden is asking for fiscal year 22, which would really be a positive impact to Cheltenham and other surrounding school districts. Mr. Fishbein, that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood.
You're welcome.
Now we move on to committee reports. I'm sorry, administrative reports. Personnel, Ms. Tolbert Jackson.
Good evening. I'm submitting the following action items for consent agenda. 1, appointment of administrator. 2, appointment of long-term substitute teacher. 3, appointment of temporary professional employee. 4, appointment of support staff A through C. 5, approval of changes in assignment A through D. 6, approval of changes in salary. 7, correction of prior board resolution A and B. 8, termination of an employee. 9, extra duty, extra pay, and 10, resignation of superintendent.
Do I have a motion?
So move, Mr. Cohen.
Do I have a second?
Second, Julie Haywood.
Do I have any board discussion?
Mr. Fishman, I would just like to, after we obviously take this vote, but welcome Mr. Metcalf as the Cedar Brook principal and Mr. Taylor as the vice principal to Cedar Brook. I think it will be a good transition for our students. Whoops, I'm actually on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. One of those evenings. Again, wanted to welcome Mr. Metcalf and Mr. Taylor as the principals at Cedar Brook and vice principal at Cedar Brook. Again, I think that, they complement each other, and I think the schools, the teachers, and the community, and the students in particular, will really benefit from them both being there. I want to thank them both for their service to our community to date.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Any other board comments? Ms. Lohman.
I just had a question about Dr. Marseille's recommendation that Mr. Ryan move to fill Mr. Metcalf's position as 9th grade vice principal at the high school. I support that recommendation, and I think it's actually makes a lot of sense. I just was wondering if we have to take any action on that or not.
No action is needed when
Okay.
I'm shifting an employee.
Okay. All right. I thought that's why I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank
Back
you.
to you.
Mr.
Back to you.
Fishbein,
Yes.
before you go on, can I allow the 3 individuals just to say a couple minutes of hello just for the community?
Please do. Thank you.
We are in the late hour of this meeting, so I'm requesting that we keep our comments brief, but I'd be remiss not to allow Mr. Jeff Schott, our new Director of Business Services, who will be supporting our business office as a result of, many of you know, Mrs. Karen Michaels, who has transitioned, and we've been getting support from the MCIU, Ms. Edling, and Mr. Linderman. But we're excited that he's on the agenda tonight. It was just approved, and just want to give him a minute to say, to welcome him and for him to say hello to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille. I appreciate it. Welcome. Thank you very much to the Cheltenham learning community. I certainly appreciate the opportunity, and I'm here to serve, and hopefully, I will, move the district and the business office in the right direction. And should there be anything that you need, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then at this time, would Mr. Metcalf take a few minutes to say hello to the community, though it seems like everybody knows you.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille. I just want to thank everybody that, that I've learned from over the past, 20 plus years. I've been a member of the Cheltenham School District or Cheltenham School Community, I'd say, for about 35 years as a student, as a teacher, a vice principal, and now a principal. So I'm very happy to be giving back to my community. I want to thank, everyone who supported me, all the teachers, my administrative team, along with Dr. Lahara, who's always pushed me, Dr. Hammond for the arguments. And, I want to thank also my parents, most importantly, my wife, who really, she allows me, to be able to give the time that I do, to this job, as it is no easy task. I look forward to working with the Cedarbrook staff members. I know they are great, as I know that the Cheltenham high school teachers are great as well. I have children in each school. So I want to thank them as well for the work that they've done, and looking to, start working together. So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Metcalf. And then Mr. Taylor, another person that this community knows and loves, but you're going into a new role. Say hello.
Hello, and I just want to echo much of what Mr. Metcalf said. In one of the many rounds of interviews in this process, one of the questions was asked to describe myself. What is my viewpoint? And my answer was that of gratitude. I operate from a lens of being thankful for all the experiences, and Cheltenham has certainly provided me with some great opportunities and great experiences, beginning at Myers, where I worked under Dr. Hart, and then moving over to Wyncote, and grateful for the leadership of Dr. Clark there, who mentored me through my principal certification. But I'm especially grateful tonight to the board, to Dr. Marseille, to Dr. Smith, and to Ms. Collins, who have offered me this opportunity to continue to serve our community in this new capacity as the vice principal at Cedarbrook. And I look forward to continuing our collaborative work with our students, our families, and the amazing teachers at Cedarbrook, and the leadership team now soon to be under the leadership of Mr. Metcalf. He and I go way back. I had the pleasure of teaching his son when I taught at Wyncote. So we have lots of good connections. And I would be remiss also if I didn't thank my husband, Doug, for his tremendous amount of support through many hours of schooling, many nights of emailing, and his love and constant support have brought me to this moment of gratitude as well. So thank you to the board for this opportunity to serve.
Ms. Haywood.
Yes, thank you. Everyone who actually just spoke, thank you very much. And thank you, and more importantly, for your service. Mr. Fishbein, I just wanted to mention, we had several retirements this evening, and I think we would be remiss not to, one, congratulate the 5 individuals for their retirement and moving on to another chapter in their lives, but to really thank them sincerely for the years that they've served our school district. One individual has 18 years. That's a long time. And then many years of 27 years, from 18 to 27 years, that's a really long period of time for serving our school district. And I just wanted to sincerely thank them for their service and wishing them well in retirement.
Ms. Haywood, thank you for calling that out. We would have been remiss not to recognize that. We usually do, but there are so many personnel moves tonight that they may have been somewhat overshadowed, but thank you for pointing it out. Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you. I want to echo Ms. Haywood's comments and also acknowledge Mr. Schroeder, who was fortunate enough, I was fortunate enough to have him teach 2 of my daughters. And in my engagements with him, I found him to be very responsive and understand he was a very dedicated teacher. But certainly I want to congratulate and thank all the teachers and staff that are retiring. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more hands raised, so I think now would be the time to Ms. Tolbert Jackson, I lost track. Were you done, or were there more items?
I just wanted to read the informational items.
Okay, go ahead.
Which include number 1, the retirements that are listed, A through E, as well as the resignations that are listed, A through E, and we have 2 non-discretionary leaves of absences that are listed. And that is it. Thank you.
That concludes your report. Thank you. Who is next is Educational Affairs, Dr. Smith.
Good evening. I'm submitting the following as a consent agenda. 1, approval of revision to 2020-2021 academic school year calendar. 2, approval of conference. 3, approval of educational service agreement. 4, approval of volunteers. And 5, acceptance of donation.
So moved.
So I have a motion. Ms. Lohman, do I have a second? Anyone?
Second.
Mr. Schultz? Any board discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. Next, we have financial affairs, Mr. Linderman. Hello. He is here.
You're on
Mr.
mute.
You're on mute, Mr. Linderman.
Now you're not. Okay.
Okay. So here I go again. Sorry. I unmuted myself too early, then I muted myself. So anyway, so we just have 3 consent agenda items in financial affairs. The approval of payments, the approval of the contract extension with Chartwells, which Mr. Fishbein previously discussed in his finance report, and the approval of the bid number 2021 for instructional supplies that you actually approved the solicitation of those bids last month.
And this is a consent agenda, so I'll ask for a motion.
So move, Mr. Cohen.
A second.
Second,
Second.
Ms. Henry got in first, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries.
And Mr. Cohen, we were taking number 4 as not part of the consent agenda. We were taking that separately.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Linderman, you want to read that or shall I read it?
Hey, you better read it because I have the old one printed.
Sure. The administration recommends the board approves the attached resolution regarding the potential outsourcing of class program services to a third-party vendor and authorize the scheduling of a public board meeting hearing to be held June 8th pursuant to the attached notice of public hearing in accordance with section 5528 of the Public School Code.
Mr. Cohen has his hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a brief question about the date of the hearing as being June 8th, which is also, I believe, the night of a school board meeting, about if that's the correct date and logistically will it occur during or before or after the scheduled, what I believe is a scheduled legislative meeting. Thank you.
That's a very good question. I'll take that. It will be before it. And Mr. Roos may have something to add. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make it clear to the public and everyone else that this is not discretionary. The district is required by that section 528 to hold that meeting just before a school board meeting. So that's, the district is complying with the requirements of the law by doing it this way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Roos. And this is just for clarification's sake, not the vote, but the vote to have the meeting to then have the vote to do what's suggested. So with that said, do I have any other board comments or question? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Was there a motion?
Yeah. I thought there was a motion.
I don't.
I will
make
Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen interrupted right before the motion at a time when I hadn't yet asked for board comment or question. So I will ask for the motion. Mr. Schultz first. Do I have a second?
Second, Julie Haywood.
Now, any further board discussion or question? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries.
Mr. Fishbein, may I make a brief comment?
You may.
I
invited that before the vote, but
it's
you are welcome
nevertheless.
to do it after.
I would just like to clarify that this hearing that for any members of the public, there has been discussion about CLASP and outsourcing, and I believe it is safe. I'll at least speak from my understanding, is that the motivation here is not simply financial, but rather related to desired academic outcomes for the students enrolled in CLASP, and that there is a feeling that that by pursuing this course, the CLASP program itself can be better aligned with our operations and more enriched and more robust for those involved. So I just thought that was important to note.
I appreciate that, Mr. Schultz. And now that you've added that to this discussion, I would also add that at the same time we were hoping to achieve perhaps better programming, we will also be having a substantially lower administrative burden, because those who attend our meetings regularly would recognize that we are almost at every meeting seeing multiple resignations and hires, taking our limited resources away from our central purpose and on the task of before and after care, which outside vendors have proven to provide very well. So for all of those reasons, the board has deliberated and considered this question over years, literally, and this is the culmination of that thought.
And with that, can I add?
Sure,
since
please.
we're on adding, it's not even 10 o'clock yet, so we'll just keep this moving. We'll just keep this. In addition to those two comments, I also want to share that we provided that there's levels of service and programming offered by those vendors that we currently do not have that would be extremely beneficial to families. So when you think about other opportunities for care, that also is part of that package as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes that section of the meeting, and we've now reached the public comments on non-agenda items, following the same rules that we used when we had public comments on agenda items earlier in the meeting. So I will ask you to raise your hand if you are in the meeting by Zoom, and send email to the address indicated if you're watching by streaming services. And I see a first raised hand, Liza Maris. Could you say where in the township you reside and then ask your question or make your comment, please? Mr. Kaufman will unmute you. Nope. Huh.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Liza Maris. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an alumna and a resident of Wyncote. Tonight, I'd like to talk about the school to prison pipeline. The school to prison pipeline is the process of criminalizing youth through school discipline policies, and it leads to children being pushed out of the educational environment and into the criminal justice system. The pipeline is one arm of systemic racism in the United States, because while discipline policies in theory affect all children, our Black children are most likely to be victims of them. To illustrate, I'll share some numbers the district has reported under the Safe Schools Act. Nationwide, Black students are 3 times as likely to be arrested as white students. In Cheltenham, they're 4 times as likely. Nationwide, Black students are suspended at rates 20 percentage points higher than the population. In Cheltenham, it's 30 percentage points higher. Across Cheltenham School District, Black students are 55% of the population, 75% of the disciplinary reports, and 85 to 90% of the suspensions and referrals to law enforcement. A few data points are fully 100% Black. All this when there's no evidence to suggest that Black students actually commit more infractions than white students. This is what the school to prison pipeline looks like. Students suspended or expelled for a discretionary violation are nearly 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system the following year. I know that this is not what we want for our community, nor do I believe it's the intention or the work of one person, but it will absolutely take all of us working together in order to disrupt the inertia of institutionalized racism. If we're to dismantle the pipeline, we need to look to the causes. The 3 contributing causes to creating the pipeline nationwide are 1, increase in suspensions and other exclusionary punishments, 2, the presence of law enforcement on campus, and 3, policies that mandate harsh punishments. And I'll take these 3 factors one at a time. In 2013, Cheltenham School District suspended 816 students, 681 of whom were Black, in 1 year. Leadership must have taken action because the numbers came down to an average of only 140 a year from 2014 to 2016. These numbers have been on the rise, however, and in 2020, there were nearly 250 suspensions, even with a third of the school year in quarantine. 85% of those were Black students. So I have to ask, do you believe the progress we have made is enough? In the same years that we reduced suspensions, however, we increased law enforcement presence, which is the second contributing factor to the pipeline. Our peak year saw over 140 referrals to police. There's only 180 days in the school year, so police were called nearly every day for 2 years in a row. To give a wider context to how 140 referrals compares to other schools, in 2018, we were reported in a news article to be in the top 5 most policed schools in Pennsylvania, tied with Frankfurt High School. Furthermore, according to the ACLU, Pennsylvania is the 3rd highest in the country in terms of arrests and referrals, and the United States incarcerates 5 times more children than any other nation. Being one of the most policed schools in the county, the state, the country, and the world, I can't even wrap my brain around this information, but this is what the numbers are illustrating. The school has since reduced the number of referrals. So now in 2020, we're around 25th in the state. And I have to ask, do you believe the progress we have made is enough? You would think with so many referrals to law enforcement that Cheltenham is a pretty dangerous place. But it's important to note that these referrals were not because there were 140 guns on campus. The third factor contributing to the school to prison pipeline is harsh discipline for routine infractions. Things you can be arrested for in Cheltenham include littering, loitering, consensual sexual contact, parking, vandalism, smoking a cigarette, and other typical teenage behaviors. The vast majority of the incidents police are called for are not required by the MOU. The vast majority of the incidents that police are called for are not crimes and do not result in arrest. And the vast majority of referrals are for Black students. It concerns me that we're criminalizing teenagers for being teenagers, but it concerns me even more that it's almost exclusively harming students of color. We have a chance today for a new vision of discipline, a new philosophy for how to treat our young people, a new way forward without the destructive law and order and zero tolerance mentalities. We even have an opportunity for a total reset when students return from quarantine. So I have to ask, are you willing to substantially revise the MOU this year? George Floyd is the Emmett Till moment of our time, the moment when we finally jumped to action, the moment when we declared that violence against Black bodies is no longer who we will be as a nation.
Excuse me, Ms. Mears. Your time is up, unfortunately.
I have a paragraph. Can I just conclude?
Sure.
Thank you. Much like the Freedom Riders and SNCC, the voice of change is coming from young people. Yes, police-free CSD may seem radical and they may make you uncomfortable, but Dr. King was viewed as radical in his time, even by many in the Black community. You may not be able to heal the country, but you can end the school to prison pipeline in Cheltenham if you have the courage to, if you have the conviction to. One day, we'll be having grandchildren asking us what we did during this second civil rights movement. And I hope that we can tell them in Cheltenham that we moved past arguments over words like abolition or demand or discretion, and instead collaborated in order to dismantle the school to prison pipeline in any and every way we have the power to. Because in Cheltenham Township, we had one of the very first free Black settlements. We led the country in abolishing slavery. We trained Black soldiers for the Civil War, and we had Dr. King himself speak at the high school. What legacy will we be leaving for the next generation? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Maris. Mr. Roos, do we have any, there are no more raised hands at this time. I'm wondering if we have anything that came in through the email from people who are streaming.
I don't have any, so unless Mr.
I didn't see any either.
I don't see any. The last one is prior comment period.
So that concludes the public comments on non-agenda items section of the meeting. The next is response to prior public questions, and we've discussed before the meeting that there were no unanswered questions. For information, the future meetings are as listed on the agenda. And I think that concludes our business. So I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Charles Burdell Williams.
Do I have a second?
Second, Pam Henry.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.